Hi, this is Carl with another SOP video for managed service providers. Today I want to talk about how you communicate. And more specifically, what are your standards around communication? Recently there's been a flurry of spam, and I'm sure you've seen them, where people say, "Hey, can I put a schedule on your calendar for tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Of course, the answer is no. Responding to random emails and getting somebody to put a calendar invite in my inbox is not the way that we make appointments. That is not the way we communicate. Now, there are similar things where people say, "Oh, I tried to get a hold of you on LinkedIn." Like, "Oh, okay. That's not my inbox," right? How do you communicate? And more importantly, how do your employees and your clients communicate? One of the things that's happened as we have grown the National Society of IT Service Providers is that we've seen the plethora of ways that people communicate. Discord and Slack and this chat and that chat and Twitter messages and Facebook and LinkedIn, and oh yeah, some of them even use email. Remember email? That's my favorite. And I tell people I will not be on Slack, I will not be on chat, I will not be on interruption-based communication systems. But other people say, "I love Slack, and that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to hang out there all day, and if you want to get a hold of me, that's the best way to do it." Everybody has to define their own best way of communicating. But more importantly, your IT company must define what you will do in the most important communications. Here's what I mean. You need to define two types of critical communications. First of all, internal and then external. By internal, I simply mean when there's an emergency, when something big happens, how will you communicate with your employees? How will your service manager communicate with technicians? How will the customer service manager or sales manager communicate with their staff? How will the office administrator communicate with the admins? What does that chain look like? And for many of you, you have a very small company and it's very straightforward. But what is it? Way back when we did disaster recovery plans in the 1990s, we used to define these phone trees. This person will call this person, and this person will call that person, and da-da-da-da-da. And if phones are not available, here's what we will do. It was not unusual for people to have a designated telephone answering system outside the state, so that in case there was a major earthquake or something like that, you knew that you could call into that number and there would be a message. If there was a message, it would be there. So everybody could eventually figure out how to get communication under those circumstances. That's the kind of thinking, and it's way easier today than it used to be. But because there's such a plethora of options, how will your employees get the message if there's a major earthquake, if there's a fire, a flood, a tornado, right? A pandemic, a snowstorm? If for whatever reason the primary means of communication is cut off, what can they do? What can they expect? And this is not a difficult problem to solve, but you have to do it. You have to write it down and you have to have an answer so that your employees know, oh yeah, in an emergency, we're going to do that thing, and whatever it might be. Similarly, you need to tell your clients, this is how we will communicate with you if there's a problem. If there's a major outage, a nationwide ransomware that is shutting down servers randomly or infecting people, or our ISP is not able to talk to your ISP, what will we do and how will we get a message through to you? It might be, we will call down a list of the top 3 people you give us in your company, and we will talk person to person on telephone or leave a voicemail. It might be email. It might be Slack for all I care. but you have to define it. You have to let your clients know. It is literally the case like when something goes wrong, they need to be able to pick out a book, turn to page 1, and there is the emergency communications protocol. Now, this is one of those things that it almost never gets used, but you have to make sure you have it, and then you have to make sure, and I would argue once a year, maybe in, I don't know, January or February, make sure it gets updated and that it's still a system that you're going to use. I mentioned way back we used to do phone calls. Well, now we don't use phones in my company. We haven't in 12 years. So if we're not going to use phones, what are we going to use? And how will we communicate with people? You need to answer these questions for yourself, for your employees, and for your clients. Internal and external communications. Now, interestingly enough, I passed over very casually what comes before this. You also have to have a policy. How do you normally communicate? Technician wakes up in the morning before they go to work, 7:45 a.m. How do they know whether they should show up at the office or show up at a client's office? What's your normal method of communication? Define that and then determine internal and external communications in case of emergencies. Remember, it's a simple thing, but it just has to be done like many other SOPs. For Small Biz Thoughts, this is Carl Palachuk wishing you the best of luck in your managed service business.